Okay, now let's talk about learning distance control, or how far we're going to hit the golf ball. Number one, we have to make sure our other fundamentals are there. We have good low point control. We have a sense of our angle of attack, so we're not chopping down too hard on it. And we have to make sure we're hitting a relatively straight shot. We're not hitting massive hooks or massive slices, because if we're hitting massive hooks or massive slices, it's going to affect how far the ball is traveling. We can hit a gentle draw or a gentle fade, something within reason, or a straight shot, but if we're hitting huge curvatures, we're not going to really have a good sense of how far our ball is traveling, because it's going to alter our spin and our distance too much. So good contact and reasonable curvature. After we have those two things in our pocket, then we can understand how far we hit the golf ball. First, map out how far you hit each club. If you hit your lob wedge, your sand wedge, your gap wedge, every club in the bag, figure out how far you hit when you hit a normal shot. If you make a full swing without swinging extra hard, or without swinging slower or softer, doing any manipulations, how far does the ball travel with each club? Now, when you're hitting your wedges and you're hitting your mid irons, just figure out how far the ball travels, because your ball is probably going to hit and stop pretty quickly to where it lands. Unless you hit the ball very low and the ball is rolling out, then also figure out how far the ball is rolling after the ball lands. It's going to be different for everybody. If you can only hit your driver, let's say you hit your driver 150 yards or 200 yards or 220 yards, somewhere in that range, well, your ball is probably not going to fly as high. When you're hitting something like a 7 iron or a 5 iron, something like that, your ball is going to land low and it's going to have more roll. But if you can hit your driver 250, 280, 300 yards or more, you probably have enough height and spin to make your ball stop very quickly. And it's really only when we're hitting long irons or woods that the ball is going to have some rollout. In either case, pay attention by hitting some balls into a green. If you hit balls into a green, you can see if the ball is stopping very quickly or if it's rolling out. In either case, map out both distances. Map out how far the ball is flying in the air when it lands on the ground, and if it's releasing forward more than a yard or two, take that into account as well. Here's the reason why. The last thing we want to do is hit a shot onto the green. Let's say we're hitting a 5 iron or we're hitting a hybrid or a wood. The last thing we want to do is say, okay, I have 220 yards to the pin. I know my golf ball carries 220 yards, but then you don't account for rollout. Well, what if your ball lands 220 yards with your 4 iron or your 3 iron or your wood or whatever it is, but then it rolls out to 230. Well, you might roll over the back of the green and go into a bunker or a water hazard, or leave yourself a short-sided chip, which is a bad miss. Even though you might have hit a good shot in the green, you hit it into a bad spot because you didn't account for how much the ball was rolling. Or on the opposite side, and I would say this is the more common problem, especially for people who don't hit the ball particularly far, they'll say, hey, I hit my 5 hybrid 150 yards. Wonderful. But you might hit your 5 hybrid 150 yards total, but it flies 135 yards in the air. And then it rolls out the additional 15 yards to travel 150 yards total. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, what if you have a 150 yard shot, but at 140 yards, 10 yards short of the flag, there's a bunker or there's a water hazard? Well, you shouldn't be hitting your 5 hybrid, because yes, if it could fly far enough and roll out to the flag, you'd hit 150, but you can only carry it 135 yards, which means you're never going to hit it over that bunker, or you're never going to hit it over the water short, which means you're going to hit it into a hazard for no good reason. It's just purely because you didn't know how far your club is carried in the air, and you made a bad decision because you didn't have enough information at your disposal. Maybe you should hit the 4 hybrid or your 7 wood, because that would have carried 150 yards in the air. Yes, it might have rolled out past the pin to 160 or 165 yards, and you'd have a longer putt, but you could carry the bunker short, you can carry the water short, and you can get into a safe spot on the golf course. So understanding both how far the ball carries and how far it rolls out, if those two numbers happen to be different, for some of our clubs it'll be the same, some of our clubs will be different. Understanding those two yardages when we hit a normal shot is very, very important, because it's going to play into our course management and how we build a strategy and what clubs we choose to hit in different times. So that's goal number 1. Learn to make solid contact, have a reasonable curvature, and when you hit the ball solidly on the club face, you're not hitting it thin or fat or towards the toe or towards the heel, you hit it solid. See how far your ball travels with each club in the bag, both how far it carries and how far it rolls out. Once you figure that out, let's just say for a random example, you hit your 9 iron 130 yards. We'll just use that as an arbitrary example. Well, from there, let's learn 2 different skills. Number 1, you have your normal shot now. So if you have a 130 yard shot or 128 yard shot or 131, just hit your 9 iron. That's going to be close enough. But the other skills we need to learn are, what is the maximum distance we can hit this club, and how can we take yardage off of the club? For example, if you hit your 9 iron 130 yards normally, well, if you swing as hard as you possibly can while making solid contact, maybe you can hit your 9 iron 135 yards. Well, if that's your max, that's important to know, because if you have a 138 yard shot, well, we know no matter how hard we hit it, we'll never get the 9-iron to the hole. So we probably need to hit the 8-iron. So it tells us where our absolute cap is for what our clubs are. So learn whatever your maximum distance is as well if you swing all out and make solid contact. Then from there, we're going to learn the skills of taking off yardages. I recommend everybody over time learn to take off at least 5 and 10 yards off of each club. If you want to become a better golfer, also learn to take off 15 and 20 yards with each club. But as a minimum, learn to take off 5 and 10 yards with each club, because that's going to give you options. It's a really good thing to have when we're in between clubs. Again, let's say the 9-iron. Let's say we hit our 9-iron 130 yards and we hit our 8-iron 140 yards. Well, if we have a 135-yard shot, we have the choice of whether we want to max out the 9-iron, which means we have to hit it perfect. We can't miss it in any kind of way. Or we could hit the 8-iron, hit it a little bit softer, and we can get the ball pin high, which generally speaking is the better play, because we're stacking the yards in our favor. We don't have to be so perfect. We can get away with a little bit of a miss and still get the ball pin high. So it's going to open up different yardages for when we're in between clubs, but also it's good for different scenarios. If we have a back pin, we can land something more to the middle of the green and let it roll back there, because we're hitting a less lofted club and hitting it softer. Also, if we're hitting into the wind, we generally want to take an extra club or two, not just because we need that extra club or two to make the ball travel far enough in the wind, but also if we're swinging something softer and something slower by hitting it less hard, we have less spin, the ball gets less up in the air, which means it's less affected by the wind. So there's many scenarios which taking off some yardage is a very important skill to have, so we want to be able to do that as well. So, to summarize what I just said, because I know I talked in a very roundabout way of all those things, basically there's 3 skills we're going to learn right off the bat for distance control. Number 1, what is the stock yardage you hit with every club? That's your carrying yardage and how far it rolls out after it hits the ground. Second, learning your maximum distance with each club when you hit it full tilt and you hit it solid. And third, learning to take off 5 and 10 yards with each club. And if you want to have more skill, learning to take off 15 and 20 yards as well. The maxed out distance is easy. Swing as hard as you can, wait for solid contact, see how far that ball travels. Your stock one, that's easy. Make a normal swing, wait till you hit one solid, and see how far that travels, both carry and roll out. Taking off yardage is where the skill comes into play. There's different ways we can take yardage off. To take off yardage, we either need to make our club shorter, aka we need to choke up on the club, or we need to make our swing shorter, or we need to make our swing slower. If we can do one of those 3 things, or a combination, we can make the ball travel shorter. The other option we have at our disposal is we can play with our curvature as well. What you're going to notice over time, if you don't already know this, is the more we make the ball fade or slice, the shorter we're going to hit it. The more we make the ball draw or hook, the further we can hit it. So those are basically our options. So let's go over them real quick, and then I want you to play with all of them, see which one works best for you, and whichever ones work best, adopt those, and whichever ones don't, discard them. First, the lowest hanging fruit is learn to choke up on your clubs. Learn to choke up a 1/2 inch, a full inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, somewhere in that range, and see how much distance it takes off. For some people, it's going to make almost no difference. For some people, if they choke up 1 inch, they might take off 10 yards with their clubs. I've seen it go both ways. So learn to choke up on your clubs, wait until you make solid contact and see how far the ball travels, and see what the difference is between your normal shot and the choked up shot. And if it takes off a significant amount of yardage, you can add that into your repertoire and learn to hit the ball shorter. Again, you just map it out. Wait till you hit a solid shot, see how far the ball travels, and you know how each choking up distance affects your yardages. From there, play with your length of the swing. Instead of making a normal full swing back like this, you can make a 90% backswing or an 80% backswing or 70% backswing, or you can measure it a different way. You can say, okay, I'm going to make a half swing or a 3/4 swing or a full swing, however you want to quantify it in your own head. I would keep it as simple as that in the beginning, but you can play with how far you're taking the club back by either saying I'm going to get to a certain place with my arm or have a certain percentage of how far I'm taking the club back. Again, correlate that. I would just start by saying I'm going to have a full swing, a 3/4 swing, and a half swing, whatever that feels like to you. And again, see how that correlates to different yardages and adjust accordingly until you can learn to take off 10 yards and 5 yards with each club, at the very least with your mid-irons, short irons, and wedges. Then play with the speed of your swing. Instead of swinging at full speed in this direction, try and swing at 90%. Then go down to 80%. And then keep working down until you can swing at a percentage that lets you take off 5 yards and 10 yards. And if you want to keep going, keep going. But see how that works for you. Some people respond better when they swing slower. Some people respond better when they swing shorter. Some people respond better when they choke up. So see which one of those players you are and start there. If all of them work, then you have your choice. If only one or two of them work, well, then use those one or two and discard the other one. The final one you have, again, is curvature. Well, now at this point, you should be able to curve your ball from right to left and left to right. You should be able to hit the draws and fades at your command if you're learning this skill. Play with how much you're curving it. If you can make the ball curve more right to left, you should be able to pick up a little bit of yardage. If you make the ball fade more, you're going to lose some distance because you're going to have more spin. For me, I have a rough formula. This isn't universal. This is just for me myself. Whenever I try and hit a draw or I try and hit a fade, I basically add a yard for every yard my ball is curving. If I'm hitting a 1 yard draw, I'm expecting my ball to travel 1 yard further. If I'm hitting a 5 yard draw, I expect to travel about 5 yards further. And if I'm hitting a 10 yard draw, I expect to go about 10 yards further. It kind of caps at that point. If I hit any more curvature, I don't really gain any more distance. But that's roughly how much yardage I'll gain if I'm curving the ball that much more right to left for myself. Again, that's not going to be universal for everybody. It's going to be different for each person, but you can experiment with it. And then the inverse is fairly true with a fade. If I'm hitting a 5 yard fade, I have to play an extra 5 yards of distance because it'll travel 5 yards shorter than normal. And if I hit a 10 yard fade, I'm losing about 10 yards of distance. For that one, the more I fade it, the more distance I lose. It doesn't start capping like the hook. I just progressively continue to lose more and more distance the more I start to slice the ball. So again, that's not a universal rule for everybody, but that's how I've found for me, my distances get affected as I'm curving the ball different ways. So again, you have your choice. You can choke up, you can make your swing shorter, you can make your swing slower, you can change your curvature, or you can do a combination. I can choke up, have a shorter swing, and hit more of a fade and really take off a lot of yardage. I could choke out, keep my swing all the same, and hit a draw and make the ball go further. I can play with it however I need to, but those are the tools at your disposal. Now that you understand that your goal is to go out there and practice it. First, learn your normal yardages, both how far it carries and rolls. Then learn your max out yardages, and then experiment with all three. Choke up on the club, make your swing shorter, make your swing slower, hit some draws, hit some fades, see how far each one of those goes, and learn which ones work well for you. What's funny is some things might work well with certain clubs and other things might work well with other clubs. For example, you might not be able to fade a wedge, but you can fade a long iron very well. You might want to take off distance when you're hitting long irons in woods by hitting fades, but you don't like making your swing shorter or slower because you don't have enough spin and it doesn't feel comfortable enough. Whereas with the wedge, you might make your swing shorter and slower and that's zero problem, but in order to hit a fade to take off distance, it's impossible. So you're going to notice what works well for you and what doesn't, but the only way to learn it is to go out there and experiment. So those are the different tools you have at your disposal in order to take off yardages. Practice with each one and learn to get good at them until you can take off 5 and 10 yards with each club at least, and you understand your normal distances and you understand your max distances with each club.